Okay. Next question on the list. I've been ignoring a lot of questions lately. I came back from 1990 and whatnot. What are the cause and effects of the possibility of 605 amps or at least 12 amps constantly against the stuff inside a vehicle? Which is pretty obvious. If you overamp anything with a lot of, like I said, they like to reference the comfort features. Let's say powered seats. Why did my powered seats all of a sudden give me electrical shock? That I could have swore, I seen all kinds of different crap with my hands and feet. Well, that's simple. You overamped. Unless you hit a power line. And that's the only time that it wouldn't be the car's fault. Where a surge of energy went through and blew your power seats out. If you ever looked at some of the Dodges and some of the Chevys, I think Chevy and GM and Ford got rid of these, but it's not that. Some of the older ones do have heated seats in them, or they have heated seat installations, which were actually supposed to go away. I had a better idea for heated seats, which was just to take your inline air duct, they run underneath your feet, and just take an air duct and box off the rear part of the seat and just heat the seat, which would be what's called a fresh air heated seat instead of an electrical. They don't listen, so apparently they're not that interested in actually having customers. Talking about Dodge, GM, and some of the other ones. Like I said, I think GM, Chevy, and Ford no longer have heated electrical seats. But I could be wrong. As far as the constant, let's just say 100 amps constant in a vehicle. If you ever notice, the more stuff you take out, like the carpet, and you put rubber down, and you take out the cloth seats and put leather seats in, what you're doing is leather does not tolerate electricity very well. It'll actually amp up a current on electricity. Synthetic seats, the same thing. The more fiber sports seats won't actually protect you as much as you think, so that's the other thing. And all that foam doesn't always protect you, since the frame of the seat is actually metal. As far as foam, it's actually somewhat considered wet even when it looks fully dry. They forget about that kind of thing. The other thing of it is the 100 amps constantly going through the frame of the vehicle. You're constantly touching a metal steering wheel, which is surrounded by foam and whatever the cloth is they use on the steering wheel. That's why metal steering wheels from the 1960s went bye-bye, because they were no good. Once, let's say, even lightning or a power line hit your vehicle, if you were holding on to that steering wheel, you got knocked, not on your rear end, but you guys zapped pretty hard. That's why that went away. The interiors of a car became more foamy to, not cushiony, but a little bit different type of foam that some people don't quite understand. More of a latex foam. And that was so to try to keep, if an electrical item went bad and let out a shock, to try to absorb it before it hit the customer. Some of you might say, how do I know this? This is because I took the complaint to these companies, being that they're the ones that have to answer to me, not the other way around. Not even CEO can outrank me in the sense of business and what I know and what I can pull away from that company, and they can go under. So with this being said, of trying to protect people and whatnot, and having to deal with unions fighting the system, I want the metal and the wooden steering wheel. Oh well, it's not viable if it's wet or dry to keep an electrical shock from a person. You want that, go down to Advanced Autos or whatever autos store and buy it and put it in yourself. Therefore, you're responsible, not the manufacturer of the steering wheel, if you get knocked on your rear end. In a way of speaking, only by reference. Here's where you're sitting. Put the add-ons in yourself was the above agenda for these companies. Not to take the blame because of their stupidity. Not to listen to comments of, oh, I want a fiberglass, metal inside, frame, steering wheel. No, we're not going to give it to you. It'll be supplied at Advanced Autos or wherever auto store for you to go hurt yourself if an electrical fault would happen. Now, once beyond the warranty, a lot of manufacturers understand this, is even though a person buys a vehicle, they can buy a vehicle back. So that means every Ford out there that's sitting around rusting that does not sell, that auto sales company, if it's a company, or auto sales outlet that's selling the car, can call Ford up and say, you want to buy this back. Ford by contract of Europe has to buy that vehicle back, but not at the price that the sales company wants. So if it's worth $2,000, they'll give you $2,000. But they won't do this constantly. So if they think that car will sell and it's refurbishable on a lot, they may help you find or market the vehicle before buying it back. If there's too many vehicles like there is right now, like I said, every person who has a car could have 3 cars inside North and South and Canada. Every person can have 3 cars, whether paid for or not paid for. Every person could have 1 to 2 trucks, plus the 3 cars. That's how many vehicles are out there right now. When we get into the bigger SUVs, you could actually have 1 SUV plus the trucks, plus the cars, for 1 person. And this is the fact I'm getting to, is as you're going up on the number, you got 3 cars, 2 trucks, 1 SUV, that's 6 cars for a single person. Do you really need that many vehicles sitting on a car lot? It's a lot of gas sitting around going to waste if it's not sold. The other ones are simple. And like I said, going back to the question, what could happen to a person if this actually happened? Simple. How many people got diarrhea after getting out of a long ride? Sit down at the toilet, you got diarrhea. Your insides feel cramped up, and you don't feel good. You don't feel like throwing up, you just don't feel good. Your insides tighten up like you're having contractions, and you're a male. Or you're a female and you feel like you're having contractions. And you know it's not that time of the month. That's one thing of electricity that ain't good for you. The second thing, how many people have problems losing weight? That's another thing. Electricity does not burn fat. If it does anything, it makes it numb. It'll neutralize it in the sense of doing anything. So when you go to that gym and you're pumping iron for 45 minutes and getting no responses, you're not, you don't get tired and whatnot like you should on normal workouts where you didn't drive your car for, say, 5 days. You walked to work. Now you're learning something. Your muscles aren't responding like they should. Even the fat. You don't sweat. Doesn't mean your organs, if they're organs, the lead race organs, have actually shut down, Doesn't mean that has actually happened yet. But your insides just aren't functioning correctly. That's why truck drivers are more stay-at-home, making short travels more possible for truck drivers than long hauls. That was another order that came out that was put against what Europe thought, and Europe thought it was a good idea. China thought it was a good idea. Africa thought it was a good idea to localize more of the travel with truck and trailers because they have a bigger 24 amp or 24 watt battery. And I believe it's called a 6 cell, and that's what I'm trying to figure out. If it's 12 volts per cell, if it's 12 volts per cell, it'd be 128 watts. So having that metal floor in your truck and trailer, it really does you no good. It does you no good to take that little thing and ground out to your frame either, because that'll just actually increase the current through your body. Having your shoes on is a good idea, but let me remind you of one thing about electricity. Look at the arc welder. Watch some arc welding movies on YouTube. What do you think grounding does? Causes an arc, a flash. I won't say a weld because I don't want people welded to the seats, but it does cause a problem for a person. Bottom line, your kidneys start to hurt and get hard. Different parts of your body, too much electricity. You can limit that electricity down, and if you're running 12 watts on a 12 amp amplifier, which is a total of 24 amps maximized and whatnot, then you don't need to sit there and run your alternator at 1 amp per second. You don't need to run that alternator 1 amp per 4 minutes. Per say 4 minutes. The amp should actually be putting out something of a 0.0005 when it produces. But at the same time, here's the other problem that these companies don't tell you. They don't want to tell you. They just want to show you how nice the vehicle is that it's almost impossible to create a 0.005 amount of electricity coming out of that alternator without heating up the alternator. It's not spinning fast enough, even though it can create it in the sense of that. Or not later, it's great to make it, actually. So, I mean, that's where my idea of what's called twin backing a vehicle, where you actually put your alternator, your AC unit on a centrifugal clutch unit. All it does is means that the pulley spins out when it's not in use and spins freely without generating any electricity. Same way with the AC. You'll see it click in, click out. When it doesn't click in, click out with your AC. It needs to be serviced. It's just a very, very little bit. And that's where you hold 2 batteries inside the vehicle. And the reason for this is one's kind of grounded to the frame of the vehicle on the positive, not so much on the electrical of the vehicle, and the other one actually gets charged. So one gets what's called an out-of-round charge, as the other one doesn't. The slow-end process of feeding a vehicle electricity. Well, that means it has technically no ground wire, which some say, oh, I got shocked. That's because of your tires. And then we went back to, let's not twin the vehicle and just make a negative ground battery, no plates whatsoever, to charge, because you get a flooding of charge, which is, as I like to put it, if you had to put in a reference of an example, you take 2 pitchers of water and you slowly pour one in by dripping it, and the other one's just filled, and then you take the cup and you just lean it over to this other one as it flows over into the negative. Well, the problem is discharging the battery requires it to go back to the manufacturer, and it doesn't last as long. But it does keep the electrical shock off the person to a limit of, let's say 24 amps is going through the vehicle. It would take 12 amps and on a consistent basis of 5 years, because diehards have been doing this to test out whether or not it really works on a sodium battery, where it's more of a sodium filled battery with liquid, but not as much liquid as there is sodium to discharge any and all electricity that goes to the negative side. which is still a universal power supply, but the negative now is encased in plastic to keep the shock factor away from the person. So it does work, but it doesn't last as long. You used to be able to service a battery. Those days are long gone for the particular reason that people don't like to sit down and read the instructions. That's the other problem. As far as what needs to happen with a vehicle, as I like to put it, maybe it's just time that people give up driving as many vehicles and go back to localizing living to where people aren't required or paid at all, except bus drivers and taxis, and people who are responsible in the sense of, when I ain't got nothing to do, I turn the key off and let the car discharge out the electrical system. Where there'd still be cars, you just won't be allowed really to drive them so much. So like where I live, which is still rural, a bus would end up coming up, or you not charter, but you type in like your information to get a ride at this specific time, where it all kind of all blends in. So if you got to be at work at 7 o'clock, and so does 20 people where I live have to be at work at 7 o'clock, they'd pick you up around 6 o'clock, just like the school bus would, and take you to work. That's where government-owned businesses destroyed independent and non or private investors' business. They could make cost of living almost nothing for a person. So that $40 you put in gasoline, they could take that and run a single bus around in around where you lived and all over, and pick up more people at a specific time and location that you had to be at work at the same time, because work was scheduled around people. So if I needed you at 7 o'clock, that means you needed to be out at the bus stop at 6 o'clock with about 50-some people. And that bus would make it on time after it stopped and picked up 2 to 3 other batches of people, and then it would proceed to the company. It may sound like communism. That's how a lot of people take a $50,000 job, where they're getting taxed $8,000 to $9,000 a year, and end up spending $41,000 or saving $41,000 to a certain limit, and actually banking more every year than they thought they could. It's called smart living, where the cost of fossil fuels, if they're fossil fuels, to erase fossil fuels, go down tremendously. That means instead of needing 30,000 barrels of oil and gas and petroleum, you only need maybe 30,000 barrels of petroleum and very little of everything else. Anyway, have a good day.